Is Genesis literally true with the talking serpent, the forbidden fruit literally true? You always like to say, evolutionists, atheists, they believe that humans came from dirt or from a rock or something, right? But
that's ultimately what the evolution theory teaches. Yeah, we came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago.
And you realize when you're saying that you're skipping all the intermediate steps, right? I mean, humans did not come directly from a rock. They came from other animals, which life arose from non-life, etc., right?
Well, my van did not come from a rock directly. I mean, somebody had to mine the iron ore and smelt it down and separate it and add the carbon,
okay.
And but it happened because of intelligence. Some intelligent people took the parts and made the parts and put it together, made it run. To say that because the van is all natural products, which it is, therefore it made itself, is ridiculous. Because man is all natural components made from the 92 elements of the earth, I agree. But it shows evidence of design and a mastermind working on those components.
So atheists believe that. So you're saying that atheists believe that humans came from a rock, and you also believe that humans came from dirt, literally, right?
With a designer, not without a designer. That's the vast difference. Any more than saying my van came from the iron mine, which is true, but it didn't come out of the iron by itself.
So in the Genesis it says God basically scooped up dirt, made the shape of a human out of it, and then breathed into it to give it life. You think that's literally how it actually happened?
Oh, absolutely, I do. Can a person? You do computer work, right?
Yeah.
Can a person design bits, ones and zeros, which is simply electrical impulses? Can he put them in a certain sequence and cause it to do something? Create an action or reaction from this series of zeros and ones, the binary code? Sure, he can. It's an evidence of intelligence. And so, for God to make man out of the dust is amazing. We are made from the dust of the ground. I think everybody would agree that there's every component in the human body is some combination of some of those 92 elements, naturally occurring elements.
But wait a second. Don't you believe, you're just talking about like a programmer doing engineering, but that's not what you're thinking God did. I mean, aren't you literally thinking God took dirt and basically formed it in a human by just putting dirt, just packing it together, and then brought it to life by breathing into it, literally? There's no programming. It's magic, basically. He brought it in because of God's power, God's miracle.
Well,
there's no programming or anything there.
Yeah, the specifics of how he did it, I don't know, but obviously we do have an incredibly complicated code, a program. The DNA is a computer program way beyond anything man's ever made. Probably just the DNA in your body.
But there's no mention of anything like that at all in the Genesis story. So I'm really confused as far as you saying you take it literally, but then you're saying, I don't understand. How did God do all that programming and everything if you just put dirt together?
He just spoke all the stars and the earth into existence. He didn't touch a thing. Why he chose to touch man and do something, form him, I don't know. I guess it shows we're special. But he spoke everything else, and just his word made everything else.
Mm-hmm. So like a lot of magicians sometimes, sometimes people call it incantation. They'll give an incantation like abracadabra, and then poof, it happens. And so,
right.
So if somebody says like, well, what you're doing is just talking about magical thinking, where God just says poof and it happens, does that seem like a legitimate criticism, or are you saying, yeah, that's God's magic, basically?
Well, if you want to use that terminology, I guess that's your choice of words, but the Bible says God did it, and I believe that. Is it just magic for a person to take a blank DVD and rearrange the code, or DVDs are a bad example, rearrange the code on there just by rearranging the magnetic impulses, and now it carries a message? You can put a message like a song or a movie or something on a piece of plastic by arranging those ones and zeros.
Right, but there's nothing. Yeah. But there's nothing supernatural in there. Whereas, like when Jesus changes water into wine, there is no way logically that could happen because there's so many processes that go to grow grapes and press them and age it and all that stuff. And here Jesus did it in one, waving his hand or whatever he did over it.
Well, yeah, that's what he said he did. I believe that. Now, that sure beats the theory of evolution, which says all this same stuff happened with nobody doing that, nobody touching it, nobody designing it, just blind chance. You're the one that's got the wild religion, in my opinion, to believe that there is no God to do this. Like if I showed you, if you're walking along the beach and you find a computer or a cell phone washed up on the beach, and I said, who made it? And you said, well, nobody. I found it on the beach. Well, it's too complicated. Waves don't do that with silicone on the beach.
But one of the so one of the common complaints on that is that when you say you find a watch or something, you're talking about finding things that we know that humans created. And when you look at the DNA, this is not something that humans created. I mean,
but Bernie, if the DNA is a billion times more complicated than the watch, then it's common sense 101 to say if the watch was created, the human who found it must have been created.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's fair to say it's more complicated. I mean, if you want to, you can make somebody could probably make an argument that a snowflake is so complicated. You could just put a microscope on it and look how intricate the patterns are and all this. It's hard to say. I mean, working in computers, I know how powerful computers are, and computers can do things that people can't. So, I mean, it's like apples and oranges. There's a different kind of complication.
Okay, well, would you agree that...
I mean, it's like, for example, some people say the human brain is the most complex thing in all the universe. I don't know if you can say that. Supercomputers are, in some ways, much more complicated than a brain. It depends on what the function, what you're trying to do. I mean, if you want to drive a car right now, I'd rather have a brain, but if you want to simulate a nuclear explosion, I'd much rather have a supercomputer. I mean, you can't do that. A supercomputer can do things in hours or days that a human would take a billion years to do by hand and still mess up.
Well, unless you look at the fact that you can imagine an atomic explosion in a matter of a microsecond.
But you couldn't simulate it and find out the exact, what would exactly happen, which this is what they're doing with simulations. They're getting exact results without doing it in real life because of their calculation power. Like working in the computers, we actually, the amazing thing is working on these advanced computer chips, we actually simulate computer chips before they're built. They actually get the bugs out of the design code before it's actually even built. That's how well they can simulate them, because they know what the process technology is like, and it's kind of mind-boggling, the computational capabilities.
Well, and there's nobody with half a brain and one eye that would think the computer happened by chance. And yet they think the human cell happened by chance, or a blade of grass happened by chance, which is able to reproduce itself, which adds billion more levels of complexity.
Yeah, but like I said, we know what humans can make, though, and it just seems like it's apples and oranges comparing biology to man-made devices.
Okay, well, I think it's a fair analogy.
The fascinating thing there, too, is, with human DNA engineering, like with this CRISPR thing, they're starting to modify the DNA code, so it'll only be a few more years where they could actually create things with DNA, and it's going to be interesting to see what actually creatures are going to develop. And they'll probably do it much more efficiently, like have smaller genomes because there's less waste and everything in them. So that's going to be an interesting...
Or they might create something for which there is... it creates a bigger problem, like bringing kudzu vine to the United States. We've got them growing every place now, or, feral animals that should not be in a certain place because they have no natural enemy, like the starlings brought to America. So maybe it's what science... you have great dreams and visions of it improving things. Maybe it's going to make it worse.
Okay. One last question on this. Somebody said, it was interesting how in the Bible, the devil in the Old Testament, he's just a talking serpent. He's got no power really, in the Genesis. He doesn't really do much, but by the time you get to the New Testament, this devil is everywhere tempting everybody. It's like, how did the devil get so escalated up there like godlike powers from the Old Testament to the New Testament?
I never thought about that one. That's a good question. Maybe he had those powers all along. The Bible says in Ezekiel 28 that he was the anointed cherub that covereth. He was very proud of his wisdom, his beauty, his power. That's another whole theological study, I guess, someone could do on Satan and the origin and who is this guy? What's he like? And he certainly was created. He's part of the ordinary creation. He's not God. And we're going to marvel one day when we see him cast into hell. We're going to say, this is the guy that did all this trouble? I always think of the Wizard of Oz movie when they pulled the curtain back, like, this is the guy pulling the mirrors and smoking mirrors. And that's it? That's what we're going to say when we see Satan, I think. But
It's kind of interesting, in Genesis verse 3:1, it's kind of interesting how it says, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? So the way it's presented, it sounds like, it says, now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord had made. So it kind of like puts him on the level of an animal, and doesn't say like he's in heaven or, going around tempting people or anything.
Well, it says he's more subtle, more crafty more subtle than all the creatures, all the other animals. So I guess that would put him on a different level, not the same level.
Okay. I guess we have an interpretation difference there. Last question. We don't have much time on this one, so just a few minutes, but